Junko Furuta was a bright, hardworking teenage girl from Misato, Japan. Born in 1971, she was known among her classmates as polite, disciplined, and ambitious. Junko did well in school and worked part-time to support her education, dreaming of a stable future and independence. She lived with her family in a quiet neighborhood and followed a routine life that reflected responsibility far beyond her age. No one could have imagined that her life would soon be shattered in one of the most tragic crimes in modern Japanese history. In late 1988, Junko was returning home after finishing her part-time job. It was an ordinary evening, and she followed the same path she always took. On her way, she encountered a group of teenage boys she knew from the area. One of them had a reputation for being aggressive and involved in delinquent activities. Junko tried to avoid trouble, but that night, her life took a horrifying turn. She was taken against her will and held captive. From the very beginning, Junko was isolated from the outside world. Her captors controlled every aspect of her life, ensuring she could not escape or seek help. Despite being in a residential area, fear and intimidation kept her silent. The environment around her became a prison, hidden in plain sight. What made this case even more disturbing was the failure of the adults around her. Junko was held in a place where family members of the perpetrators lived, yet no effective action was taken to rescue her. Fear, denial, and neglect played a devastating role. Junko endured unimaginable suffering, not because help was impossible, but because it never arrived in time. Throughout this period, Junko showed remarkable strength. Despite her circumstances, she attempted to survive, holding on to hope that someone would notice or intervene. Her resilience stands as a tragic reminder of how powerful the human spirit can be, even in the darkest situations. However, strength alone was not enough to overcome the cruelty and indifference that surrounded her. Weeks passed, and Junko remained trapped. Outside, life continued as normal. Neighbors went about their routines, unaware or unwilling to confront what was happening nearby. This silence would later become one of the most criticized aspects of the case. The question lingered, how could such a crime continue for so long without intervention? Eventually, Junko's life was taken. Her death marked not just the loss of a young girl, but the collapse of a system that failed to protect her. When her body was later discovered, the truth shocked the entire nation. The details that emerged forced Japan to confront uncomfortable realities about youth violence, bystander responsibility, and the justice system.
As news of Junko Furuta's death came to light, shock spread rapidly across Japan. What initially appeared to be another tragic crime soon revealed layers of failure, cruelty, and neglect that deeply disturbed the nation. The police investigation uncovered how long Junko had been held captive and how many opportunities there had been to save her. Each new detail intensified public outrage and disbelief. Investigators began piecing together the timeline of events. They interviewed witnesses, neighbors, and individuals connected to the perpetrators. It became clear that Junko had been held in a residential area, not some hidden or remote location. This realization raised painful questions. How could such a crime continue unnoticed for so long? Why did no one step in when there were signs something was wrong? As arrests were made, the identities of those responsible became public. They were young, known to local authorities for previous delinquent behavior, and yet had managed to commit one of the most severe crimes in modern Japanese history. The investigation revealed that intimidation and fear had played a major role in keeping others silent. Some people had suspected wrongdoing but were too afraid to confront it or alert authorities. This silence became a central issue in the national conversation that followed. The case moved to court, and the trial drew intense media attention. Reporters, legal experts, and members of the public followed every development closely. The courtroom became a place not only for legal proceedings, but also for collective grief and anger. Junko's family faced unimaginable pain as details of her suffering were discussed publicly. They demanded accountability, not only from the perpetrators, but also from the systems that had failed their daughter. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence showing the prolonged nature of the crime and the calculated efforts to conceal it. Defense arguments focused on age and legal technicalities, which only fueled public frustration. Many felt that the law was prioritizing procedure over justice. As verdicts were delivered, outrage erupted once again. The sentences handed down were widely viewed as inadequate given the severity of the crime. Public protests followed. People took to the streets, expressing anger at what they saw as a broken justice system. Advocacy groups demanded reforms to juvenile crime laws, arguing that age should not shield individuals from responsibility for extreme acts of violence. Junko Furuta's name became a symbol of these demands, representing countless victims who had been silenced or ignored.
Media discussions expanded beyond the courtroom. Television programs, newspapers, and magazines analyzed every aspect of the case. Experts debated the psychological, social, and legal factors that contributed to the tragedy. Many pointed to the dangers of ignoring warning signs, the impact of bystander inaction, and the need for stronger community intervention. The question was no longer just about what happened to Junko, but how society could prevent such crimes from happening again. The case also forced Japan to confront uncomfortable truths about youth violence and accountability. It challenged the assumption that extreme crimes were rare or isolated incidents. Educators and policymakers began discussing reforms aimed at early intervention, education, and mental health support for at-risk youth. Junko's story became a case study in what happens when warning signs are ignored and systems fail. Internationally, the case gained attention as well. News outlets around the world reported on the crime, expressing disbelief at the circumstances and the legal outcomes. Human rights organizations referenced Junko Furuta's case in discussions about victim protection and justice reform. Her story crossed borders, becoming a global example of why legal systems must balance rehabilitation with accountability. For Junko's family, the legal proceedings brought no true closure. While convictions were secured, the sense of justice remained incomplete. They continued to speak out, urging authorities to remember their daughter not just as a victim, but as a young girl with dreams, kindness, and potential. Their courage in the face of unimaginable loss inspired many others to demand change. Over time, Junko Furuta's case influenced policy discussions and public awareness campaigns. Schools began emphasizing the importance of reporting abuse and standing up against violence. Community programs focused on encouraging people to act when they suspect wrongdoing. While no reform could undo the past, many believed that Junko's legacy could help protect others in the future. This part of Junko's story highlights the broader impact of her case. It shows how one tragedy exposed deep flaws within society and the justice system, sparking conversations that continue decades later. Her story became a turning point, reminding people that silence enables cruelty and that justice requires both courage and action. Though the legal process concluded, the emotional and social consequences were far from over. Junko Furuta's name remained etched in the public memory, serving as a reminder of what happens when violence is ignored and accountability is delayed. What followed would shape how her story was remembered not only as a crime, but as a lasting call for awareness, reform, and justice. The years that followed did not erase Junko Furuta's name from public memory. Instead, her story slowly transformed into something larger than the crime itself. It became a symbol of the consequences of silence, fear, and systemic failure. Long after the court proceedings ended, people continued to ask what justice truly meant and whether society had learned anything from what happened to her. Junko's case began to appear in textbooks, documentaries, and academic discussions about crime, ethics, and responsibility. Educators used her story to teach students about the importance of empathy and moral courage. The focus was not on sensationalism, but on understanding how ordinary environments can become places of unimaginable harm when warning signs are ignored. Her story forced people to confront a painful reality. Evil does not always hide in distant places. Sometimes it exists behind familiar doors. Public awareness gradually grew around the issue of bystander responsibility. Many discussions centered on the idea that crimes of such magnitude rarely occur in complete isolation. There are often moments where intervention could change the outcome. Junko's story became a reminder that speaking up, even when it feels dangerous or uncomfortable, can save lives. Campaigns and community programs emphasized reporting suspicious behavior and supporting victims without hesitation. Her family's strength played a major role in keeping her memory alive. Despite their grief, they chose to speak openly about their loss. They wanted the world to remember Junko as more than a victim. She was remembered as a kind-hearted teenager, a daughter who loved her parents, a student with dreams for the future. By sharing who she truly was, her family reclaimed her identity from the crime that took her life. Over time, the legal system also faced continued criticism because of this case. While some reforms were discussed, many believed they did not go far enough. Activists argued that justice should not only punish wrongdoing but also actively protect the vulnerable. Junko Furuta's story was frequently referenced in debates about sentencing laws, victim rights, and the balance between rehabilitation and accountability. Media portrayals evolved as well. Early coverage focused heavily on the shock of the crime, but later works approached the subject with more care and responsibility. Writers and filmmakers began highlighting the broader lessons rather than the details of violence. This shift reflected a growing understanding that retelling such stories carries a responsibility to honor the victim and educate the audience, not exploit tragedy.
International audiences continued to learn about Junko's case, often expressing disbelief and sorrow. Her story resonated globally because it reflected universal issues: abuse of power, fear of retaliation, and the devastating impact of indifference. Human rights advocates cited her case when discussing the need for stronger protections for victims worldwide. In this way, her story crossed cultural boundaries and became part of a global conversation about justice. For many women, Junko Furuta's story became deeply personal. It highlighted the vulnerabilities women face and the importance of safety, awareness, and solidarity. Advocacy groups used her story to encourage women to trust their instincts, seek help, and support one another. While fear was part of the conversation, empowerment became the larger goal, ensuring that no one feels alone or unheard. As years turned into decades, Junko's name remained a powerful reminder of why society must never grow complacent. Each generation that learned about her story carried forward its lessons. Teachers, parents, and community leaders emphasized the importance of compassion and accountability. The idea that it couldn't happen here was challenged again and again by remembering her case. Ultimately, Junko Furuta's legacy is not defined solely by how her life ended, but by what her story awakened in others. It exposed weaknesses in systems, challenged harmful attitudes, and inspired conversations that continue to this day. Her story urges people to look beyond themselves, to recognize suffering, and to act when something feels wrong. While no outcome can undo the pain her family endured, Junko's story continues to serve a purpose. It stands as a solemn warning about the cost of silence and a call to build a society where victims are protected, believed, and supported. Her life, though tragically short, left an impact that refuses to fade. In remembering Junko Furuta, the world is reminded of a simple but powerful truth: justice is not only about laws and courts. It is about empathy, courage, and the willingness to stand up for others even when it is difficult. Her story lives on, urging people everywhere to choose awareness over indifference and action over silence.